My history in science. Well, I thought it was about time just to run through my life in devotion to science that maybe the new generation, my kids, didn't even know about. So early on, father would post pictures of clouds, cumulus and nimbus and so forth in my bedroom, plus a primitive uh, baroscope on the wall. And I'd grow up loving the thunderstorms and the snowstorms, and occasionally there was even a tornado that came by. I was fascinated with weather. And we used to get these kits, these science kits, things of science, every month. We'd open it up and there'd be a number of different things that we could explore with different materials that were supplied. And as time went on, I actually did some experiments with solar heat, made a solar oven out of metal in a box, which actually cooked an egg in about half an hour. And then also a solar furnace from a Fresnel lens, and that I could fry ants with or anything that would seem like it would ignite very quickly. And in school, I did a project on Antarctica. Not so much the explorers, but just the whole environment of the very cold. So on through school, and I did biology. I was good in biology as opposed to some of the other other sciences and subjects at Andover. And I went on to college, to Antioch, and did well in biology again. And then I had the opportunity to do various uh, uh, different jobs in the area. The first one being the Virginia Institute of Marine Science, where I was explored up and down the James River looking for different physical oceanography things, and then also on the beach at Virginia Beach, where I watched the tides come in a Thanksgiving storm, which took away the beach, and the conclusion there was that what controlled the beach? The Atlantic Ocean. So from there, I went to the University of Washington and was on the Brown Bear. Went out to sea several times, collecting samples, analyzing water chemistry and temperatures, and even charted a seamount, made a model of it. And then from there, I went to the University of Southern California, and there was invited or get the opportunity to go on an Antarctic cruise from Chile to New Zealand, and 2 months on the ocean, sampling and taking uh, fish fish nettings, and also drilled one of the deepest holes in the ocean there. From there, I went on to the University of North Wales and studied oceanography there. And when I concluded Antioch, I went into Peace Corps, where I was a science teacher uh, with very few equipment available, uh, some kits of science, and then maybe one microscope. And I watched kids look in it and probably see their eyelashes, and then one kid would open his eyes and see, whatever was swimming around on the slide. But science there was who knows? We watched uh, a film in the Central Palace of the space launches onto the moon, and this didn't surprise anyone because the natives thought, yeah, the moon was only up there a few miles, no big deal. But from Peace Corps, uh, went around trying to look for graduate schools around the country. Unfortunately, the period of deep oceanography, the money was being removed for the space projects, and the graduate students there were uh, struggling. But when I got back to Maine, I was able to get into the University of Maine Darling Center in Walpole and started my PhD, which I did and was able to take part in sampling around the Maine Yankee atomic power plant for evidence that that was impeding the biology of the area from the warm water. And after 3 or 4 years of that, I concluded, my major professor, Bernie McCallis, said, well, there's only one job in that does what we do, and I'm going to be around for the next 15 or 20 years, which he managed to do. And the jobs shrank to the point where I had moved to Whitefield and was then decided that a career, I had already completed my oral exam in oceanography for a PhD, but then had no great enthusiasm for completing a my thesis project, and ended up doing some science in the schools, but then moved on to other things. So that was my career in science, but then I moved on and studied in the question of global warming, which I found was full of holes. There was just no clear evidence that carbon dioxide was increasing the temperature of the oceans, and many contradictory things that made that a scam. Basically, it's a scam. And although temperatures may be increasing, it's not because of the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And I wrote 2 books on the subject of energy and the environment, which sit on the shelf somewhere. So I moved on to other things. At 80, it's hard to believe that how many sports I participated in a lifetime. Starting out when we were just kids, we had figure skates, and we'd go down to the swamp and we'd skate, and we'd also play kind of hockey along the channels there. And of course, when it snowed, we would sled down the hills. I suppose that could be considered a sport. And in the summer, we'd have pickup. I'd go down to the Gories and we'd have pickup baseball. But I never got involved in Little League because that was in town, and I didn't know any people in town, and it was just a little bit too intimidating to do that. But as far as family, we would go bowling, candlepin bowling. That was something we did. And we set up a table tennis in the garage and in the back in the porch during the winter, and got pretty good at that. But of course, Father's big sport was golf, and he encouraged me, and we had a small, well, we had a pitching range, and then we cut the field, and we could hit balls 200 yards down if we could reach that far past the peach tree. But I never really got too involved. We did a couple of father and son tournaments, and it was more frustrating a sport for me. Um, so then I went on to junior high. We had actually at the fifth and sixth grade, we had volleyball in the gym. And of course, in junior high, we played softball and for family things. Well, I got a bicycle and I would bicycle to school. I suppose that was sort of sporting. But again, we were socially in the country, and until I got to Andover, did I participate in any number of sports. And I wasn't very good at basketball because we had a hoop outside the garage, but the problem was there was on a gravel thing and I couldn't really dribble. I could learn how to shoot pretty well, but in Andover did one semester, I believe I did that. But most of the time I played soccer, and soccer was, I was on the B team. My only disadvantage there was I had old soccer shoes and they were kind of lumpy and uncomfortable. So I guess I could have moved up a little higher, but League B was my destination. And during other seasons, in the spring, I was in track, and my specialty, if I could call it that, was the 440, and I did that in fairly good time, although I ended up starting quick and ending sort of behind the field. So moving on from there, moved on to actually in the summer, I was at Squam Lake, and we had all sorts of activities there, but swimming and so forth. But then I was managed to learn how to water ski. But for downhill skiing, we were too poor growing up, so we never had an opportunity to have skis, or the parents were too old to take us to the mountains. We did have a neighborhood downtown skiing thing and an old wooden skis we used. But then moving on to college, I continued soccer, but then one semester, well, I played lacrosse. There was one semester played lacrosse, and the big sport was frisbee football. So that was one of the things that we took up a lot of time, and it was informal. We had a lot of fun with it. And one semester I did go on to the wrestling team. Uh, and we had the opportunity to also had squash courts there, so I could play with my friend Mel Hollander. But I never really had an opportunity to do tennis growing up. But when I got married, Natasha was both a tennis player and a skier. So gradually I learned downhill skiing, and that graduated me to cross country skiing. And of course, going back, I was in cycling. And at college, I had the chance to, we had done a cross country, a California 900-mile trip when I just graduated from Andover, and then at Antioch, I did one race, a competitive 25-mile race, but my bicycle wasn't up for that. But yes, when we were with Natasha, I learned how to ski, downhill ski, and they were very into tennis. So once I left college, then we were back in the rural situation. But we did have a competitive uh, softball team that we played with, and family things. We had touch football, family events. And then I did try to go on for when I was in my mid 20s to play soccer in a competitive uh, men's soccer league, but I had a knee damage, slowed me down quite a bit with that. Um, but then I began at around 1980 to referee soccer. And for 40 years, I refereed soccer and also took my hand in refereeing uh, hockey, getting up early, 5 o'clock in the morning, and going to the Kennebec Ice Arena, where we also skated, to referee the kids, and also picked up on being a soccer coach at Whitefield School. So 40 years, and then not until I was well in my mid 70s was I still refereeing soccer for 40 years. So I think I get most of the uh, sports of interest at some level, and just find that now in my 80th year, I have trouble walking across the floor, so it's mainly in reflection that I think back on my sporting years. So, one of the largest contributions, I don't know if we call them that, but things that I took very seriously was acting and producing plays, writing plays, and putting them up on stage. And I think it must have started like in the fourth grade, where I played Tommy in Healthland, where I lay down on the stage and dreamt about, woke up or had a dream about having different vegetables coming and telling me how good they were. And so I was center stage, the hero of that. And then moving on through that, I was in the Mikado, We Are Gentlemen of Japan, etc., etc. And at Andover, not so much. I was a stagehand at a couple of plays, but not until I moved to Maine did I really get things rolling. There was a guy named Doug Wright, lived in town. He somehow was able to get all sorts of people involved in community theater, established an orchestra, and put on various plays in gyms and so forth. And my first one was The Music Man, where I did the song Shapoopy, da 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 da. And that sort of catapulted me. So the first thing that I did was in 1976, did a play called We Love the Revolution, where I got local musicians to write some songs and local people, maybe 25, to get up on stage and sing about Whitefield's role as opposed to the more sophisticated people in Wiscasset and the conflict between them. And it was a success, so I moved on. We opened a group called the Second, a building called the Second Fiddle, and that was a perfect opportunity to put on different plays. And one of the ones that I wrote was O. Henry, which was 21 O. Henry stories together, and gathered some momentum for doing plays at the local school. We did one called We Love the Revolution. No, that was not that one. It was The Complete History of Whitefield, which sort of just changed the history of Whitefield to look like Whitefield was in the center of everything, the Revolution, the Civil War, so forth. And again, local people with their kids now were taking center stage and cooperating. We had musicians growing together, and a fellow named John McDowell who was able to bring them together to play in an orchestra, and we did that. And another one called Gravel Grovel Gorilla, and that moved on to Rennie's the Musical, which was performed 3 separate performances and even taken to Bridgeton. Meanwhile, I'd also taken part in community theaters from Bath to Brunswick to Belfast, one called the Shakespeare Company, where I did minor roles, and in various different plays, including those put on by the Lincoln Theater, where Doug Wright had sort of taken up occupancy. But my thought was to do the plays that I thought would be good and appropriate in the other larger groups. And I'd act in small parts in those plays, and hopefully get them to put one of mine in routine. But that never came to fruition. They always said, oh yeah, well, we'll look at it a couple of years down the line. But I did have a number of straight plays I was writing, some one-actors and some longer plays. And one was called The Tournament. I was put on by Performers Platform in Boston at Emerson. And after the successful, it was about golf and my relationship with my father. And after the play, they said, well, what do you plan to do with this? And I said, oh, this is strange. One-act plays? Where are you going to put them on? Usually in contests. So that's what sprung me on to doing larger musical plays, which gathered more people. And I also got success in performing, having performed and produced other of my small plays in various theaters in Augusta and in Whitefield and Damariscotta, and at the Waldo Theater did one of Rennie's and revitalized O. Henry, and it was a wonderful career way of meeting people and engaging them, and using something that wasn't going to be necessarily going to Broadway, but was bringing together the talents of locals and the musical numbers that could be created and put into something that people enjoyed. And that sort of sprung into my participate in making videotapes, and that'll be another section. Another branch of my creativity and actual professionalism was in writing, and that all started back in the 5th and 6th grades, where I published the Wacky Weekly 1, and the 6th grade Wacky Weekly 2, where I typed out on mimeograph and distributed 2 pages of local news from the schools. And then somehow, after all the rest of my goings in college, I came back to it and started working at newspapers, initially going in and trying to convince somebody in the Augusta newspaper that I could write theater reviews. But they said, no, but you could you go to the various towns and report on local happenings, school boards. So I did that for several years, and selectmen's meetings and planning boards, and then graduated from that paper to the Lincoln County News, and from that became professional full-time writer covering various towns and the same kinds of activities, and moved on from there to the main weekly, which had a life, and ended up being the editor of that until they folded. And after uh, thrashing around for a while, also worked for the Wiscasset paper and the Booth Bay Register as a stringer. So that was my professional side. On the other side, I was writing plays, but when I moved to Mexico, I started writing short stories about my experiences here, and also some short mysteries, and eventually moved on to a couple of books about climate and energy, and comic books that would illustrate those features. Then at the same time, I was also getting more interested in videography, and went through a series of cameras, but also highlighted oral history in the Lincoln County area, taking people in their retirement and talking about their lives, how what they did and how things had changed from basically horse and buggy eras to their contemporary lives. And I got involved with a local public access station and ended up doing a news program through them with a couple of other partners. Sam Pennington and I did a review of the Lincoln County News, and then with Bobby Weir, we did various videos, local interest, and also reading the Lincoln County News. Then when I moved to Mexico, I broadened that to all sorts of activities here, the different traditional fiestas, as well as when back home I was doing parades and the pumpkin festivals, and put most of those out onto YouTube. And on top of that, added musical groups called I have 93 of my own songs posted on YouTube, and Tuba Skinny and various local bands and other activities that go in up family things. So lots of I actually have like 1,100 subscribers, and some of my videos attracted tens of thousands of people watching them. Accomplished in either one, or consider myself to be an artist, a painter, but not an artist. So, in music, growing up, we had a piano, but father played the piano, but I never was able to take any lessons. And so, not until I got to Maine did I figure I was able to pick up a violin, and took lessons with a Greek man, Kominos, for a couple of years. But then figured that to be in a group, you'd have to play all sorts of jigs and reels and be pretty good at it. And I could play some waltzes, but that was about it. So I figured, well, figure an instrument that would fit in better. And so I tried the banjo, okay, and the guitar, all right. But not until I came upon the bass did I realize that the bass, if you can keep some rhythm and some thumping behind the other players, then you'd fit in. So ended up with a group called the Narrow Gauge String Band, and played many years for different groups and for old people until we realized we were the old people. And four of the members have since died, and my friend David Pope and I are the only remaining members, and I've given up my collection of different instruments. So now I play the penny whistle. Easy to carry around, easy enough to play, and I'm good enough so when I was in Maine, I'd sit by the waterfront and play not tunes. I wasn't interested in tunes, just I suppose I should also mention that I built three houses, um, had another one built here in Mexico, and maybe a fifth one to come. Was married once, had two long-term relationships with women, and some shorter ones. Raised two pigs, several sheep, numerous chickens, and had two beautiful children.